Hello everybody, welcome back to Comedian MTG. I am your host Ian, and with me today we have the head honcho, the number one sculpty boy individual. We have Callahan here.
How's it going, Ian?
Good. And this is the second time we're recording this because my computer is silly, but we are back here. We are here for number 2, episode numero dos of the best decks not on the cEDH deck list database series. This was the second list that inspired me to do this series. Ironically, we haven't had the first list on yet, but it'll come sooner or later. But here's the second list that inspired me to do this series, and it was, I remember seeing you not only like go from the brewing process of this list, the refinement to like take out some of the spice of this list and then like make it into something like really clean, really compact, and to just kind of a menace at the table. So I'm really excited to talk about this list here today. So this is TnT Rector fit. TnT, obviously the abbreviation for Thrasios and Tymna. And then Cal, do you want to just go over sort of the high level of what this deck is?
Yeah, so for some of the people who are unfamiliar with what the namesake of the deck is, it's built originally on the kind of skeleton of legacy Nick fit, Rector fit, specifically
right.
Shell. And the idea of the deck was to really try and find how can we use Arena Rector and Academy Rector the best way in cEDH. And it kind of goes back to like the TMS deck building challenge we did last year.
Yep.
I just kind of kept doing that for myself. You can see that with this. You can see that with Arden Crom. That's just kind of my like thing. Basically what it ended up turning out is the best thing to usually get with either of them is a way to win the game.
Well, yeah,
so
makes sense.
With Academy Rector, well, Arena Rector, like the best thing you can really ever get is a Jace, which is Jace Wielder of Mysteries, so you can attempt to win. And with Academy Rector, the best thing you can really get is a what's called Pattern of Rebirth.
Yep, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So the deck kind of morphed into, it's had a lot of different looks, and then it morphed. Finally, it's kind of really in a great place now into this. It's really just a Hulk deck, honestly.
Yeah.
That's very compact. It's like a mid-range, sort of a DNV style deck.
Right. For those who haven't historically been like familiar with Hulk lists, and for those who are familiar with it, this is going to be a little bit of repeating, but the whole point is to kind of get a sacrifice outlet for Academy Rector that will allow you to get the pattern, the card we talked about that I've had up on screen for a bit. And then obviously when pattern is sacrificed, you can go grab a creature out of your deck, put it right on the battlefield, which is always your protean Hulk. And your protean Hulk ends up being in a pile. And this one for this deck is Thrasios Oracle, Cephalid, Illusionist, and Nomad's Encore. And the way Nomads and Cephalists work is that you basically target your Cephalids infinitely, and then it triggers milling 3 cards at a time until your Thrasios Oracle resolves. So basically the idea is that as soon as you sack your Academy Rector, you put the pattern on a creature, sack that again, get a Protean Hulk, sack that again, and you have a repeatable sack out on the board that's allowing you to go through this process. And eventually by the time you sacrifice your Protean Hulk, you now just have a 3-card pile, 3-creature pile here that just wins the game right there.
Yeah. For those of you who are newer to cEDH and weren't around during the Flash meta, this was the pile that got Flash banned.
Yes. Yes.
This is what they called Sushi Hulk. The reason we ended up going, or we, as if anybody really, the reason I ended up going with this specific Hulk pile is because it's very compact and
very much so.
It's incredibly good under Rule of Law.
Yep.
And Rule of Law is seeing a ton of play right now. So Hulk piles that don't need to cast another spell are really good because you're able to just get up underneath Rule of Law and use opponent's Rule of Laws almost as your own protection.
Yeah, that's why when you when Commander Legends was first coming out, you saw legit vocals go on like a 3 tier 1 con tear, making the top 4 of each one with Kodama and Tymna, because there was a lot of this like Kodama was making it basically so you could like cheat your Rector in and then like just cheat your sack outlet in after casting one of them, and then like just win the game through all of these Rule of Law effects. And the dichotomy of that compared to what the meta was expecting was really, really huge. So there's a lot of play in this sort of space that allows you to circumvent a lot of these traditional understandings of how people win the game in cEDH, and because of that, there's a lot of advantage to be gained. Not only the fact that, but like these type of permanents are harder to counter. Like the instants and sorceries here are only really relevant if you're going for like the Thoracle console or the Jace console line.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting the fact that like you're able to win on so many different axes with this deck. That's really cool.
And at instant speed too, which is always
instant
nice.
Speed. Specifically, that is enabled by necromancy being able to just flash in and effectively be a 3-mana flash in a lot of cases.
True.
And we can get into this later, but I mean, there's a reason like the mana base looks the way that it does.
Yeah. We can definitely take time to check out the mana base. Definitely.
Yeah, like it's just like this is the first time I've actually ever like fine-tuned a mana base, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah.
Because this was a mana base where like every card mattered.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it seems like it makes a lot of sense here. All right, so we're back. So I switched the deck over to a visual grid just so we can start seeing some of the cards, even if we're sort of tangentially talking about it. I won't be able to scroll to them as fast, but hopefully it'll be easier for people to just see them in the background. So we went over the basic game plan. The plan is to get a Rector, sacrifice a Rector, and then through a series of sacrificial movements, you will basically win the game. And once again, great under rule of law effect, great to avoid like non-creature counters, instant sorcery counters, very strong in that light. So I guess, how did you go from this concept of like Arena Rector, Academy Rector, sacrifice outlets? How did you get to Tymna here?
it was really a basis of, so what are my core colors?
Yeah.
When I look at what is involved in the combo.
Yeah.
And
so for the Protean line to work, as we talked about, Cephalid's blue, Nomad's white, and Protean Hulk is green, right? So you need at least band.
And at the very least, like if you're going to do like you can do this without blue. Like there's piles to do this without blue.
Right.
They're just a little bit more awkward.
I've never been a huge fan, but yeah, because there's definitely like pieces that can more easily be interacted with as far as like creature removal and stuff like that. Yeah.
And so like I've definitely worked on an Abzan version of this list. But this is like kind of the original because like a lot of it came down to where it's like, well, I get access to blue, which gives me protection spells.
Yeah.
I get like Abzan is really the core of it.
Yes.
Because you need black for the sack outlets.
Right.
You need white for your Rectors and you need green for your Protean Hulk and your pattern. Yeah. So you're already there, and then you just have to figure out what your fourth color is going to be at that point.
Like I'm flashing on the screen right now are 2 sacrifice outlets, and it's important if you guys notice that it's a sacrifice of creature : and that's very important because that means that these are repeatable sacrifice outlets. They don't need a tap, they don't cost mana, and they really open up your combo line so that you, basically that's first sacrifice happened, and then you just kind of keep going.
But yeah, so I ended up landing on Thrasios and Tymna, sort of like, I mean, honestly, it's like reverse engineering DNV, right? Because you're
that's definitely not Viral's, which was the sort of original Protean Hulk Tymna list in our format. Yeah.
And so, you know, obviously Thrasios and Tymna are great grind engines.
Yep.
And so, you know, it's a deck that, I mean, if you look at the list, we're playing Dothy, we're playing Draneth, we're playing Gilded Drake, Grand Abolisher, we're Op Agent, all these. We're playing a mid-range deck that has a reasonable amount of interaction. It's going to be able to sit there and sandbag while also being able to interact and also being able to win very quickly if it needs to. So it's just a very versatile list, which is what I really
24
like
instances, nothing to scoff at for sure. That's
very true.
Although no force of negation, Cal, come on.
Well, okay, so but there is a reason for that.
No, I know.
There, for the people at home, the reason you pick Pact of Negation over Force of Negation is Pact of Negation. Your counter spells you end up using more defensively than offensively. So you want them to be able to protect your win attempts.
Right, which Pact is better at,
Yeah, and so Force of Negation just doesn't quite get there. And Pact of Negation is just like, I've tried both of them out, and Pact was
they're definitely, there's the Tymna decks of the format, and then there's the Thrasios decks of the format, and like, I feel like this deck is a little more heavily leaning towards the Tymna angle, whereas like I feel like the more of the Thrasios decks in the format, the slower, grindier, the stuff I play, is those are more of the Force of Negation style decks.
You say that, but there's also a Seedborn Muse.
Yeah, I did notice as well.
This list definitely.
Yeah,
I've almost started like putting my nose down and trying to tutor Seedborn Muse as quickly as possible some games.
Yeah.
Because I've never lost a game that I've like resolved a Seedborn Muse.
Yeah, same. I mean, Seedborn Muse is stupid. I love that card. It's so good.
It is very good.
Yeah. I mean, even if your deck isn't like built around having Thrasios out all the time, Seedborn Muse is the big good. It's a real good card.
Sure.
Okay, so we talked about the high level stuff. You have your sacks to get the Rectors to get your pattern package going. I've noticed that as far as reanimation is concerned, I've noticed that some Protean Hulks lists tend to go like really deep into the reanimator aspect of it, whereas I feel like your list, obviously being Rector focused, is a little like, I have some reanimation effects because you have Necromancy, as we talked about. We have Animate Dead, but that's are you on Reanimate as well?
I'm on Reanimate.
You're on Reanimate as well, but that's it as far as like from graveyard stuff. Obviously, Survival's like really good at like not only putting things in your yard, but it's really good at like getting Rector to your hand and stuff like that.
Also Liliana Death's Majesty is also
yes. So let's talk about your 2 Planeswalkers. I think that's a very important part of the list, and especially I think anyone seeing Liliana for the first time, because I straight up did this when we first talked about this list. I was like, Cal, what paint are you huffing? And why are you playing Liliana?
It definitely is one of those cards that it's like very unintuitive at first.
Yeah.
So Jace, I think, is fairly obvious.
Yes.
There's a lot of lines where you're able to just kind of win on top of people with Jace,
which is so cool.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
But with Liliana, what you're seeing is she's really taking the place of Body Snatcher here.
Okay.
And the reason why I chose Liliana over Body Snatcher is the fact that, one, we're playing Arena Rector, and you could make an argument that maybe Arena Rector isn't as good as Body Snatcher. However, in my experience, Body Snatcher is a card that I think is subpar 99% of the time, outside of the times you're attempting to win.
Right.
And the advantage of Liliana is a good mid-range value piece outside of the combo.
Makes sense.
And so if you, for instance, have the Arena Rector, have a sack outlet, and you have an Entomb in hand, which is not an uncommon like set of cards to have out.
Right.
You can throw your Arena Rector down, get Liliana and Entomb Protean Hulk, and we're off to the races.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where I think when you look at it on the surface, you're like, well, you can't do this, but it works the same way in a double Hulk pile. And then when you just raw to play it, you get a lot more value off of it as well.
Okay. Yeah, and that's, I just mentioned like the fact that this is just -3 reanimate something is obviously like very synergistic with what your deck is trying to do. And then obviously the Jace stuff opens up a lot of really cute interaction. The fact that you can just be like, all right, I'll play my Arena Rector. Your opponents are kind of like, well, I don't really get what's happening. And then you like just sack it, get Jace out, console. And then I assume there's a good amount of ways to just like get those draws. Obviously Thrasios, great way to draw at instant speed. And there's things like
we play Peatland, Nurturing Peatland and Waterlogged Grove.
Yes, yes. So down here in the
which
mana
are
base.
Yeah, very important parts of the mana base there.
Yes. So funny. I remember listening to the Kess breakdown on Into the North, and they were talking about how important like Fiery Islet and the other, what other one can they play in Kess? It's Fiery Islet.
I think it's just Fiery Islet.
Is it? Yeah, I guess it is, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're talking about how important Fiery Islet was for the ability to be like, all right, and I'm just gonna have my lab mat out and then crack my land, and it's like the times in which that becomes relevant are pretty big. I've played with a good amount of Lab Maniac, and those crack lands, the lands that allow you to sack and draw a card. I think they call them Horizon lands.
Yeah.
Those lands end up being pretty huge in a deck like this.
Well, and that's why I'm on stuff like Crop Rotation, where at first you look and you're like, why are you on Crop Rotation? And it's like, well, you're lands and what lands you have at any given moment is like weirdly important in this deck.
Also, you're playing one of the best crop rot targets in Emergent Zone, which is hot.
Yes. There's Emergent Zone, there's Gaia's Cradle, you have your Horizon lands.
Yeah. A lot of good targets. Phyrexian Tower is also another one that's like being able to instant speed. Oh, get my sack outlet. Boop.
Yeah. There's a lot of pieces with that where I don't want to call it a toolbox deck because it really isn't, but it has some toolboxy qualities too.
Yes. I love that with Phyrexian Tower and crop rotation, you can, like, if you're missing your sack outlet, you can, like, at end step before your turn, crop rot for tower, sack the Rector, and then you'll untap on your turn and then sack the pattern. That's like that's just so good. But then you need your Protean Hulk sack. But still, like, there's just lines like that.
Where you have to double Hulk, where you end up getting like Nomads, Viscera Seer, and then you get Arena Rector, and that's where Liliana is really useful. You're gonna I apologize to people at home because there are times where you're gonna hear us talk about some more complicated lines, and those just come about with, like, if you play enough cEDH with like the necromancies of the world, you start to realize how many weird, like, niche for example, I was in a game at an LGS yesterday, and one person was like, they had an Enlightened Tutor and they were going to go for they were playing Razakats. They were going for like reanimation piece, and instead they like went for Value Engine and drew it off Thrasios and played it, and they were stuck under a Rule of Law. And I was like, oh, you should have just grabbed Necromancy there. And they were like, why? And because the next turn their opponent had a thing that would infinitely mill them out. And I was like, because then on your upkeep, you can just reanimate your Thassa's Oracle and win the game. And they were like, I can't believe I missed that line. They were like, that's so hot. And I was like, yeah, just next time grab your Necromancy. But like, you notice a lot of these weird, like, fidgety interactions is what I call them, because it's a lot of like, all right, in response I'm gonna sack this to get this and then get this, and it does kind of have that toolbox angle. It's a lot like when you see a really competent Yisan pilot pop off. It's like you know all your pivot points, like the fact that your Academy Rector, it can get your Pattern of Rebirth, but also at desperate times it can be the thing that gets you your Necromancy to get your Protean Hulk back to sack it at the end of turn, or it can be your Survival of the Fittest because for some reason you need the engine going and your opponents are doing something bonkers and like you can't break through that. So it's like the pivot points in a deck like this are actually really important, and it's one of those things that I think one of the reasons I like this deck so much is that knowing these pivot points really allows you to like get a lot of play, which Thrasios and Tymna already does, right? Thrasios and Tymna already rewards you for being like, just like, here's generic value in the command zone. And then when your deck is also adding on top of that, being like, and you have all of these flexible pieces to get out of any situation. Well, and that's part of what I really like about this is that it's really able to like change direction when it needs to. And I think that's part of why I like playing. Like, people would be like, oh, well, this loses to like a null or a, what is it? Like a Grafdigger's Cage or a Rest in Peace. I'm like, okay, sure. I'll just pivot to just
Consult.
Consult Oracle, I guess. Like, it's not like you can't get around that. And I think that's why I like this type of mid-range strategy, where it is a fairly slot-intensive deck. I'm not going to lie about that. But all of your pieces overlap in a really good way, so that it's a very layered list. Which, if you're familiar with anything that I build, I am
a very layered list.
I am the king of layering things. Like, that's where I'm just like, this piece works with this piece, but it also works with this piece, and it works in this way, and it's just like, I feel like Charlie Day standing at a whiteboard, like
I know showing exactly what you're talking about.
The meme from It's Always Sunny. But like, that's kind of how it is, and it's one of those lines where like sometimes you'll get a Spell Seeker and you'll think, well, what do I need right here? And depending on what's going on, you just grab Neoform, get Academy Rector, or you like, there's just so many lines with this deck. I love
Tymna
it.
being able to Neoform into Academy Rector and Thrasios being able to EE into Academy Rector is like, I feel like that's an interaction that people would miss right off the bat, but that's gotta be huge. One of my favorite layering interactions with White Hulk decks right now is the layering of like Ranger Captain of Eos being able to get your sack outlet and then be the protection for your combo turn, it's so good. It's very good. Oh man, like the fact that you can be like, yeah, okay, I'll Ranger Captain, go grab my Viscera Seer, play that, and then next turn you're like, all right, I'm gonna sack my Ranger Captain, play my Rector, and you're done.
Yeah. Well, and that's also another interesting point is I had a friend who was piloting this list before, a couple weeks ago,
right?
When we were at a tournament and they drew Caverner Souls and they played it and they're like, what creature type do I name with this? What is Thoracle? And I said, no, you name human.
Yeah.
Go through the list and look how many humans there
the humans are insane.
All of them are important.
Yep. Like we're talking about Esper Sentinel, Noble Hierarch, Dranith, Grand Abolisher, Opposition Agent, Ranger Captain, Spellseeker, Academy Rector, and Arena Rector. Also Tymna, I believe. Yeah. So a good amount.
It's secretly a tribal humans.
Just slapping the Winota. I don't know what you're doing.
If only I could.
Oh, no, that just inspired me so deep. Oh no, I got something to brew after this.
Uh-oh. But yeah, that's kind of like one of the things that I really enjoy about this is all of the layers to these sorts of things. And that's part of why I like Hulk as a win con so much.
Right.
Is it allows you to be able to pivot into strategies very quickly.
Agreed.
And part of why I was kind of disappointed in this is gonna sound, I hope I'm not being too controversial on your channel.
Oh no.
I was kind of disappointed in the community how after when Flash was banned, they just abandoned Sans Red Hulk, it felt like. And I think Sans Red, like none of what I'm playing here is terribly new. Right?
Yeah, that's super valid. Yeah.
Dothy and Esper Sentinel are new, but
they're not functional to the engine of the deck, right?
They're not doing it. Like this is
they're in every Tymna deck now, right? Or Thrasios Tymna deck, right? Like that is
there's nothing groundbreaking in the technology here about like new things. These are things that have existed, but we're just playing like a different angle to it, and we're going, okay, so instead of playing Flash as our piece that's getting this, and so we aren't playing Summoner's Pact anymore, we're not playing these sorts of things, we're just changing our approach to it a little bit. And this is one of the things where Sick and I have talked about this a lot, where with like Academy Rector is so good.
Just I'm a huge Academy Rector fan.
It's viciously underplayed.
Agreed. Yeah, no, part of this conversation, I've had a deck in mind, and I'm not gonna drop the ball on it too early, but like this conversation has just accelerated that part of my brain so much right now that I'm like, oh no, I got a whole brew thing I gotta go do right after this.
Well, and like that was like kind of what I was hearkening at with like what I was just saying is like, I know a lot of people were like, oh, you gotta play like Tana Tymna Hulk and play Penrith Hulk, and I'm like, I still think this is like probably the best shell for it because it's able to just move its axis of interaction and like where it's able to pivot in any direction you want it to go at any given moment.
And I think like the ability to like have these really hard to counter threats and then be able to save your interaction for like either protection like we talked about, because you're not like overextending to get rid of like the only stacks that really stops you is like Grafdigger's Rest in Peace, right? So and even then we just talked about that you can pivot around that. So the fact that you can then save your interaction for things that actually like matter in the game and still get all of like the blue interaction TM, right, is pretty cool. I will say your list is very counterspell light, I would say, in comparison to a lot of lists in the format, for sure.
This is a deck that I've played a lot of different versions on this. And it's one of those things where if you play, it's like really hard to find a right balance, I feel like, in these sorts of lists. And I think, you look at how many pieces on the instant sorcery speed sort of stuff is, and a lot of it's tutors, a lot of it's removal, and I think I prioritized that because I feel like I'm able to protect my stuff without counter spells for the most part pretty well.
Okay.
What I need is ways to get rid of the things that I don't like, which is why I've tried stuff like Grim Hireling, which is why I've tried stuff like what's the black like Cephalid Coliseum type land?
Cabal Pit?
Yeah, Cabal Pit.
Yeah.
So that you can deal with these things without needing to like
overextend into them. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's all about like, and this is one of the things about the deck that I can't harp enough about.
Right.
Is it's trying to take game actions. It's trying to maximize as many game actions you can take with minimizing how many spells you have to cast.
That seems super valid. Yeah. Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
It's very cool. And I like a lot of the stuff that's going on here. Question, I guess we can do this by section, right?
Sure.
So let's start with so we talked about the Planeswalkers basically. So we talked about, that's the Arena Rector package. As we mentioned, we had the 2 sack outlets here in Carrion Feeder and Viscera Seer. Not a lot of surprise there. You're on Oof and Null Rod.
Controversial plays.
Yeah, right. You're on Oof and Null Rod, which seems pretty strong.
Yep.
In the current meta. What's the choice there of like going for those pieces specifically?
I don't really care about my artifacts.
Yeah.
And especially when I'm not on Altar of Dementia, I'm just like, hey, I can just slam these down. These are going to slow my opponents down, and I have Thrasios and I have Dorks, and I'm just going to sit here and activate Thrasios, draw cards, and wait for my time. And
gotcha.
It's just like, you don't need artifacts, and like having generic hate for your opponents is really good.
Nice.
This deck has a lot of similarities with like its hate pieces with like something like Razakats.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Except for I feel like your oofs don't need to be sacked for winning.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Question about the sack outlets. You do only have 2 hard sack outlets in the deck. So what was the kind of reasoning behind being so slim on those?
So I have tried a lot of different amounts of them, where I've tried having like 4, I've tried having 3, and basically what it came down to was Carrion Feeder and Viscera Seer are the easiest to consistently tutor up. They are generally not going to be turned off as frequently as the other options.
Okay.
And we still also have Neoform and Eldritch Evolution that are also sack outlets.
Okay.
So it's one of those things where it's like, they're easier to tutor, they're harder to deal with.
Yep.
And nobody's playing Curse Totem anymore. So it's
truth. Big facts.
If Curse Totem was more prevalent in the meta, I would probably consider slotting in Altar of Dementia.
Right.
Over, I don't know, just something.
Before we continue the deck tech, today's episode is actually sponsored by Moxfield. Moxfield is the deck building website that you see here. I know I personally use it for all my deck building, and Cal, I'm pretty sure you do as well, correct?
Oh, 100%. I made that change like 2 years ago.
Yeah. When Braden introduced me to the site, I was like, I'm in, I'm sold. They have so many features, so many amazing things. The amount of times I have been able to directly message them on a Discord. I believe in Moxfield so much that I am a patron of Moxfield. It is a fantastic resource. And yeah, I've been able to literally message the developers and be like, hey, I have this problem, can you help me? And they're like, all right, computer idiot. They wouldn't say that because they're great, and they don't call me that. I call me that. But they help me through a ton of stuff. You can do amazing things like have this visual view here, which I've used for the deck tech. So many options. They have a Scryfall-based search engine. It's a fantastic site, and I literally wouldn't use any other site for deck building. Okay, cool. So moving on, creature-wise, we have just a lot of I'm not going to nitpick the value creatures here, right? Like Douthie, Drannith, Gilded Drake, Grand Abolisher, all insane. For those who haven't played a lot with Neoform decks, Neoforming a Dork into a Grand Abolisher is something that people never expect for some reason. I straight up watched it happen in what was it? It was like one of the early Marchesas in the finals. Everyone had a ton of interaction, and they were like, all right, we're gonna let this Neoform resolve, but because I think he's baiting counter magic for the flash, and then he Neoformed his Dork into Grand Abolisher. He was like, all right, now I'm gonna cast flash. And I was like, all right, that's the tournament, everybody. GG's.
There you go. Yeah, Neoform is a dumb magic card.
It is. It's good. It's a good card. I'm glad it exists, though. I think it's the right amount of broken and fair. It's so nice.
I agree with that.
Yeah, Opposition Agent. How's that been playing in this list? I know I've enjoyed it a lot with Thrasios specifically.
It's fine. Like, feels really good depending on like what your matchups are against, and that's kind of the hate pieces in this are pretty generalized.
Sure.
So like you can probably like I have stuff in the maybe board that you can like kind of tool this a little bit more towards your meta if you need to.
Okay. Okay.
And so like if you don't feel like Op Agent, if you want to play this is really that great in your meta, take it out. Like, I mean, that's what is neat is for something that's so slot intensive, you could take out Collector Oof, Dothy, Op Agent, or Seedborn Muse even, and like slot in other things that would be better in your meta.
Yeah, I just did a little flick through the maybe more. There's a lot of cool stuff in there for sure.
Yeah.
So I assume it's because of the Null Rod Oof thing that you are not running Wishclaw, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that's certainly a lot of I have a lot of artifact hate, and you know, I'm already pretty bare bones on artifacts as it stands.
Right. Sure.
Running just Chrome Mox, Mana Crypt, Mox Diamond, Soul Ring. We also run a kind of bananas amount of tutors as it stands.
Yeah, that's fair.
Our win cons are also tutors.
Yeah.
So it's just like, at what point have I just
you just playing tutor
deck?
deck? Sure.
Yeah.
That being said, I assume that means Opposition Agent is a major pain for you.
It is a big pain, but like
you
I
play
said
a ton
earlier,
of removal.
Exactly. That's why we play a lot of interaction.
Full circle. Yeah, for sure. That makes a ton of sense. And then obviously we talked about Seaborn Muse. I think if you're playing Thrasios, you play Seaborn Muse. That's, to some people, that's a hot take. I don't think that is. Obviously, Poly Tyrant being the exception, but
well, there's also a layer of it too where you can use. So let's say you're neoforming your Arena Rector or even your Academy Rector. You need a 5 CMC target to get with that.
Yeah.
And so this has been a lot of different things. It's been a Wandering Archaic was one of the bigger ones.
Yep. That seems pretty good for protecting your pile, for sure.
You would think the problem is it comes down to the table too late off a Neoform.
Right.
So when you want it, it doesn't get there until after the point where people need to interact with you. So that's why I was like, well, if people do interact with me on these places, my worst case scenario is, I got a Seedborn Muse.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty good bad case scenario.
Yeah, and so that's kind of my logic with it. Is if I'm looking at it and I go, okay, so my fail state is I have a Seedborn Muse, fine. Like, I guess I'm willing to lose that. Yeah. Like, that exchange. Damn.
Oh man, I'm only stuck with one of the best cards in the deck. Darn it.
Yeah. Like, oh no.
That's so funny. Or you end up scenarios where people don't know how the deck works and they're like, yeah, I don't want them to have a Seaborn Muse counter, and then you're like, wait. now they're winning.
Wait, what happened?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's very funny.
Yeah.
That trigger goes on the stack before the spell resolves.
For sure. All right, so we're down in the sorceries now. Nothing too crazy. We talked about Reanimate earlier. Diabolic Intent is normally a great magic card. Better when you have Arena Rector and Academy Rector. The fact that it's like, once again, the oh no, worst case scenario, I'm getting a demonic tutor. Best case scenario, I'm winning the game here with these sacrifice effects. Because obviously it sacrifices part of the cost, which is really cool because they can't interact with that. The cost has to be paid beforehand. So
I will say that if you are in a meta where Rule of Law is not played at all, Diabolic Intent is extremely good if you decide you want to up your like win con percentage or win con density. That is where I would say like including the Omniscience and Enter the Infinite package is totally worth it. Yes. Because that's when you get your Diabolic Intent, you sack your Rector, your tutor target off the Rector is Omniscience, off the Intent you get Enter the Infinite, you win the game. I have it in the maybe board because the metagame as a whole is very Rule of Law heavy right now.
So Omniscience plan seems a little rough. Yeah.
Omniscience is a little rough, and some of the points where you do get Omniscience out, ends up being where you have an Omniscience and not anything in your hand to really do with it.
Right.
So that is one of the things where I say it is super meta dependent, where if you're in a like meta where there's not much rule of law, this is great.
Right. Yeah. Because I remember that was one of the first times I played against this deck was you were like, yeah, all right, I'm going to Diabolic. And you did that whole line. And I was like, are we... Omniscience, what?
Did I just lose?
Yeah, for sure. And I was like, oh, this is actively happening to us right now. Okay. All right, sure.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I do like the Omniscience package in this if you want a higher density of win conditions.
Right.
But for me, the way I play and the way I feel more comfortable recommending this to a general audience
is without that
is
package.
Without the package and saying use this if you feel comfortable using it.
Makes sense. Yeah. Cool. All right, so we went through sorceries. Instance, not a lot to talk about here. Entomb, I assume, mostly just gets Hulk in the yard, right?
Or it gets a Rector. Or,
okay.
Depends. Yeah. Really depends on what's in your hand.
Gotcha. Do you ever find that like Entomb is more dead than helpful, or have you been pretty happy with it as of late?
It just depends on what's going on.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times where I don't have a reanimation spell in hand, and so it's like kind of a pain in the ass.
I find that sometimes with Entomb where I'm like, it's either fantastic in a list because you're really going hard on what you're trying to do, or it's just like, oh man, why am I even playing this card?
The issue is you have to run it.
Yeah.
Like, you can't not run Entomb in this list. It would be honestly very silly not to.
Okay.
And because of the fact that you run enough reanimation spells where the lines are there where, I mean, you can win on turn, I think 1 if you have the right hand.
Damn.
And
but
like, I think you have
for
to
that line. Got it.
Yeah, for that line, like you can just win, but it's one of those things where you have to include it. It doesn't always feel great, but it's one of those pieces where you have to have Entomb and Reanimate in your Hulk deck. It just kind of is the reality of playing Hulk.
Makes sense. I've noticed no Dark Ritual in here. Is that just because you often just like wouldn't use the ramp in the right way? Like,
yeah, it just doesn't serve like a whole bunch. It's one of those things. It's kind of similar to Entomb in that way, except for it does a lot less here.
Yeah, makes sense.
And again, with Rule of Law being very heavy in the meta, I think including rituals in a mid-range deck seems a little sus.
I'm with you there. I'm with you for sure. Yeah.
That's my opinion, but
people do it. I don't know. And then intuition, I'm also very curious about here. That seems
the intuition piles in this list are so fucking fun. So there are so many different ways that you can intuition here, where you can get 2 Rectors and a reanimation target. You can get 1 Rector and a reanimation target, or in 2 reanimation things. Like, you can have it any number of ways, but what it does is it sets you up so that you can have one of your 2 Rectors or a piece of reanimation in your hand and the other pieces you need in the yard for you.
Okay.
And you don't want to ever get Hulk with it because they then hand you the Hulk.
Yeah, that goes in your hand. Right.
You always want to do this with the Rectors because those are castable. And so a lot of the times it will either be like a Rector and like Animate Dead or Necromancy, or depending on like what's left in your deck, it might be 2 Rectors and one or the other, or a Reanimate. And so it gives you that flexibility, and with cards like Emergent Zone in it, it again allows you to win on top of people.
Yeah, so seems good.
It's it is an insane card in this deck. It's one of the things you look at and you immediately think of like Savine's Rack and Underworld Breach because we're so heavily used to that. But it turns out you can use intuition with other cards.
You're telling the Paco and Halden player here. Trust me, 3 fetch. Your opponent stares as you put 3 fetch lands in the yard, and they're like, "What?" You go like Mystic Sanctuary, baby. I mean, it's usually actually like 2 fetches in a Time Warp, but you know what I mean. Oh, so good. I love Intuition. It's a good card.
It's very, very good. Very good
but my thought definitely there was like, so basically it gets one of your pieces, right? It's not like one of those Intuitions where you get to greed out fully, but it gets you a win condition.
Yeah, it gets you a win condition into your hand, and generally, you have some assortment of ways to protect your win.
Right.
Whether that's through Cavern of Souls or Ranger Captain,
right,
or Grandaball. Like, you have so many different ways to protect your win.
Yeah,
which is really neat.
Cool.
That are static too. So.
Yeah, I'm all about it. Okay, moving on. We talked about the artifacts already. It's literally a bunch of artifacts to make mana, and then Null Rod to stop you from using the aforementioned artifacts that make mana.
Kind of the reality of playing mid-range TnT.
Yeah. So we have Carpet here, Mystic Remora, obviously staples. We have our 2 reanimate effects that we talked about earlier with Animate Dead and Necromancy. Sylvan Library, Survival is, if you're playing a deck where creatures are your win cons, turns out Survival of the Fittest is a stupid magic card.
It is a very good magic card.
That card is real good. Yeah, that is definitely, as a cEDH player, I feel like that the stocks on this card specifically have gone way up in my time playing, because I feel like during the Flash era it wasn't as relevant, because you were like, well, I could just flash with my green, or what's the 0/2 Summoner's Pact? Yeah, I could Summoner's Pact to get my flash going. But then when that was gone, now suddenly all these creature decks are like either Razakatting off, or they're doing stuff like this with Rector, or getting Malcolm Glinthorn. Like, it just, Survival's so good in the format right now. Yeah.
One thing to keep in mind too with Survival is
here's the spice. Here we go.
Is if you don't have the sack outlet on board and you need it, let's say you have like Protean Hulk in hand or something already. Sure. You can just pitch the Protean Hulk, go get Viscer Seer, pitch another creature, go get Academy Rector, play Academy Rector, and then
like do your thing. Yeah, exactly. That seems
or you can get Arena Rector, whatever way you want to do it.
Right.
I love the lines that Survival opens up.
Yeah, and like one of the other classic ones that I really enjoy is like survivaling to put like Hulk in your graveyard, and then get like Spellseeker, and then get the reanimate off of Spellseeker, and then if you have a sack outlet, you just win the game. Yeah, so Survival's stupid. Is a good stupid card. Pattern.
So never let Survival resolve if you're ever playing against a deck playing Survival. Just always counter it. Never let that card resolve.
I was playing at a pod yesterday, and someone went to cast No Survival, and I was like, you don't understand how confidently I'm playing this Force of Negation right now. They were like, honestly, fair enough.
Never let the Survival resolve. It's good.
So good.
Good, what's it called? Like, rule of thumb.
Yeah, for sure. And then Ristic and Pattern, obviously, is the win con we talked about earlier.
Yep.
We talked a lot about these lands already. Kind of pointed out the important one, Cavern, obviously great for protecting your stuff. Emergence Zone, you can punk people. Gaia's Cradle, obviously broken card. Phyrexian Tower, instant speed sack shenanigans like we talked about before. Having that on a land is obviously super good. And then we have our draw lands. So that's basically it. I took a little peek while you were going over some of the maybe board stuff earlier. We got some extra Planeswalkers here. I do love the idea of grabbing a Karn off of the Arena Rector. I'm not gonna lie, I have a big old soft spot for Karn. I like that when you were talking about Grim Hireling earlier, I was a little bit like suspect for a second, thinking about like, well, you're on Null Rod, you're on Oof, but then I realized that the activated ability on Grim Hireling does not care about any of those things, and it's just removal on a stick, which is very cool.
Kind of why I've considered it is because it's like, okay, I don't have either of those effects out. Cool, I'm ramping. Also, I have this removal that gets you a rule of law here too.
I don't care if I can't actually tap my treasures for mana. However, I can pay 1 black and absolutely nuke a ton of creatures on this board state right now. Yeah, that seems very strong. Notion.
So I will say, Liliana, Dreadhorde General, don't sleep on that card. It's kind of busted.
Okay. All right. I would love to hear you out on this one.
So it's one of the it's not as good as the Lily that's in the deck.
Right.
At all. But if you want to play a more Planeswalker centric version of this list, Liliana really is good because one, it creates some bodies for you.
Yeah.
But it also is a sack outlet that also disrupts your opponents.
Yeah, it seems good.
So there's a lot of advantage there where being able to stop your impact your opponents while also doing your own thing,
for sure,
I think is very underrated. Also, just
good
drawing cards is good. Turns out.
Notion Thief, obviously with less wheels, it's not like a snap included in the deck, but it's definitely like, I assume there's metas where they're just
a meta.
Yeah, the greeting into wheels, and that feels good. And then there's some more reanimate, some counterbalance, training grounds, things like that. So
yeah,
very cool. Why why Stony Silence out, Null Rod in, I guess is my question.
Stony Silence costs a generic and a white, and Null Rod costs 2 generic.
Okay, so it's literally like I can use my Mana Crypt to slap a Null Rod down. And
Exactly.
Okay.
It's also kind of a budgetary thing to consider, where it's like if you can't afford a Null Rod and you play in an environment where proxies aren't very friendly, or you don't have the ability to play like
it seems like a very 99.99% of the time it does not matter until like the 1% that it does. Yeah,
they're going to be like you're going to play it in LGS somewhere where it's like you only don't have the Null Rod. And,
also, there's an argument that if you're in a meta that is like really heavy with like black-red turbo decks, like maybe switch to Stony, because that means that they have like almost no removal for enchantments as opposed to
that is
for
also
artifacts.
Accurate.
Yeah,
I think they have exactly one spell that gets them out of a Stony Silence.
It's like Chaos Warp and Feed the Swarm, and I think that's it.
Yeah. I don't think they play Chaos Warp very often anymore. I think it's like only
that's me being the diehard Chaos Warp player, because I think it's better than Feed the Swarm, but that's we don't have to go into
that. Yeah. So these are kind of the cards that I look at and I think are very meta dependent. Think are very like which way you want to play the deck dependent also.
Yes.
And so like Training Grounds is a really good example of this. Is if you really want to play like a more grindy mid-range
Thrasios-y,
version of this,
heavy,
and that's kind of, I've intentionally built this deck in a way that the stock build of it is going to be good. Like I if I were playing in Marchesa, I would confidently play this 98.
Okay.
And feel very good about it going into that meta blind.
Right.
But if you need to tune this to your meta, you have really good options that are going to be able to guide you towards what you need.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I like Thrasios, Tymna, Hulk lists, because of how versatile they can be.
Yeah, the pivot points, the versatility, the ability to swap between game plans, the ability to swap between win conditions, the ability to just outgrind your opponents, and also to slow down the opponents who are ready to just jam out ahead of you. I think there's a lot of play to this list for sure. And obviously a lot of play to that combination of commanders, but this list specifically definitely really utilizes that strength to its fullest, in my opinion.
Oh, for sure. You've seen the evolution of this list. Like it used to be just like
I remember when you were trying Ugin out, so like
and like there was a lot of experimentation with this. And like I said, I kind of reverse engineered DNV in a way. But you know, it definitely has its angle on things. So
I think this list is really strong. I have been a big fan of seeing it in play for a long time. I love how clean this most recent version is. I think it's like, I mean, it's just one of the cleaner lists I've seen in a really long time. A little lighter on interaction, but that comes, you know, at the pivot points of other pieces. And I just think it does some really, really powerful stuff. A lot of the cards just have a very high, like if they're not Hulk pieces, the individual card quality is ridiculous. And that says a lot. So very happy to have it here as our second best decks not on the cEDH decklist database series.
And I do feel the need to shout out Shaper and Sick Robot and Phoenix for helping me really fine tune this list.
Yeah.
And of course yourself as well. Is there was a lot of testing and trying to figure out what happened best, and you know, Sick did a lot to help me figure out really how we could clean up lines, how to do these sorts of things. Shaper helped me kind of figure out, well, what are good like backup tutors for TnT Rector, which is also something you helped with. And Phoenix is of course the person who sees every intuition line imaginable. So
that for sure.
Yes. You know, as I'm talking about this list, and I just want to thank the people who have helped me kind of explore this deck more and find it. This is probably, outside of like the Arden stuff that I brew, this is probably like my favorite thing in all of cEDH.
That's awesome.
I'm very proud of this deck.
Yeah, very much think you should be. It's why I've had it on here today, because it's a very exciting list. I think it's very strong. And to be honest, if someone were to pick this up and like just go steamroll the tournament, I would not be one of the surprised parties.
Yeah, me neither. I think it's very capable.
Yeah, for sure. Sweet friend. So thank you for obviously coming on. Glad to have you here. Is this your first time on the channel?
I think this is my first time on your channel.
Yeah.
Okay. Technically, I was on your channel kind of when you did the MLC draft video. So
yes,
technically
your voice
on your
was
channel.
technically present on my
Yes.
channel, but this is the first time I've been graced by the entirety of your being.
The first time we've actually interacted on your channel.
Yes. Actually, you called my name, and then I spoke up and said what deck I wanted, so that was an interaction.
Okay, fair enough. Okay.
No, don't give in. I'm being a pedant. But seriously, thanks for coming on, friend. We'll definitely have to do this more, and I love working with people, and that will not be something that is foreign to this channel. It's a good time every time.
I love working with you, so you know.
Well, thank you at home for joining us for this episode. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit not only the like button, but the subscribe button. If you want to see more stuff like this, I am already in talks with Hire from Playing with Power about working with him on something else soon. I'm going to be keeping this series going because I think that, only seeking the database as the only place to, highlight new stuff isn't the way to go, and the people who run the database say that as well. The database doesn't cover the extensive nature that is cEDH, and seeing really cool brews by my opinion really cool people is super nice, and you definitely get to check out like some of the stuff that's not always there and not always present and not always readily available. So I'm super excited to hype up this list. The description of the list and the deck list will be down in the show notes below. Make sure to check that out. Make sure to check out the Comedian MTG Discord. We've had a lot of chats recently in the Patron General channel, just talking tournament prep. I've created a new channel just for upcoming events, so it's really cool to have people in there for that. And as I just mentioned, if you want to support this channel, check out patreon.com/comedianmtg. There are many tiers in there. As I mentioned, the Patron channel of our Discord, although the Discord in general is open to the public. People get their shoutouts, and the names are below. Anytime I'm like asking for stuff, like polling people in the community, looking for suggestions, looking for people to play games with, I always go to my Patreon. So feel free to check that out at patreon.com/comedianmtg. And everybody, thank you for joining us on this episode. Thank you, Cal, for jumping on.
Thanks for having me.
And,
absolute pleasure.
Have a great week. Peace.